welcome. This is an introduction for educators. And the presentation is mostly meant as a summary of experience, along with some key points that I've discovered along the last, ChatGPT launched November of 2022. I was fortunate enough to go to a summit, the ASU GSV Summit, the Global Silicon Valley Summit, where I learned a lot of the information that I ended up using for this presentation and prior presentations, sort of weaving in what was going on at the educational level, but also in the professional world. So there is a little bit of a dual perspective here to take on. If again you have any questions at all, please just save them for the end, but do write them down, and we'll get to those. First things first, I'd like to start with two of my favorite quotes, and these are quotes that I've used for various purposes, but Alvin Toffler once wrote that the illiterate of the 21st century will not be those who cannot read or write, but those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn. And I actually learned that at a great PD session that I did with the San Diego Area Writing Project. It was one of those that just stuck with me forever. And I've used it ever since to really think through these new technologies and these things that I'm referring to as literacies or emerging discourses. The second quote comes from one of my favorite authors, Italo Calvino, who wrote a paper called a long essay, sort of literary essay titled Cybernetics and Ghosts. And this is an old text. And so the idea that as writers, we have a responsibility to think deeply about the implications of our technology and to use it in ways that advance the cause of human understanding and creativity. I mean, that just spoke to everything that I wanted to look into with AI. I've been thinking about these machines that can write ever since I read Calvino in grad school. And so it informs some of what I do here. Now, I'll also say that before I got started with any of this additional research, I did find this MLA-CCCC Joint Task Force writing paper way back when. Fortunately, by the time that I did see this paper, most of the concerns that were addressed by this MLA body were addressed by my classroom policy. And we'll get to that down below. I have provided it and some examples of how it addresses this document. But this is a cohort of educators and administrators coming together to understand AI almost a year ago. And so I was reacting to this. So if you want to read it, you may scan that QR code, or again, it's in your slide, so you can take a look at it later. I also like to start off with like where we are today, right? Give you a picture of where we are so that I can inform some of your questions. This right here is a chart that shows the uses of AI technology. I'll sort of let you go over where you fall. The chart, the legend is up here, right? So are you in this 37% that have never used it and don't plan to start? 22% that have used it, but maybe they're waiting until next year, 21% that use it a little, or are you even in this 2% of people that use it a lot? So this is results from studies that have been conducted by various bodies. And this is the first one that I like to think about because I myself am in this 2% right here, just because I devoted a lot of time and energy to learning about AI, have been following GPT since GPT-2. I was using some articles in my class before all of this blew up with the LLMs to talk about the computers are getting better at writing. So we had great conversations about AI prior to it becoming this big thing that it became. This other graphic here was put out by Turnitin.com, which I imagine you're all very familiar with, had an AI tracker that was turned on for a little minute, and then they turned it off. But the statistic, the 97% there, is of institutions that do not have a formal policy on AI tools. It's a huge percentage. So just giving a little picture of the landscape thus far. Here's where we've gotten to in 2024. And there's also this statistic that 22% of faculty use generative AI tools. 49% of students use generative AI tools. And so you could see maybe here how there is a discrepancy between who knows what and how is it being used. And so I think we need a little more clarity, a little more of a united front here. Now, let's get to the history then. So AI is complex. AI has many definitions. There is, what we call the narrow, weak AI, the strong AI, super AI, and then people think of AGI, as the Skynet, right? Terminator AI that's coming for us. Instead, you can think of the LLMs that have come out as more of the narrow and weak AI that are designed for specific tasks, but are not really capable of complex actions of any kind. They are very, very restricted to our commands, our inputs, their outputs. But they are already, AI is already impacting very, very specific industries, and really it's all of them. Healthcare, finance, transportation, education, you name it. And I'll show you a graphic in a minute that will give you that perspective that I took from the conference. Now, as far as the history of AI, again, the literary nerd in me, the very much fan of literature and history and mythology, likes to take it back to the pre-20th century philosophical foundations of AI. And you look at stories like the myth of Pygmalion as one of the first instances where you have humans sort of, can something artificial think? Can something that's not human have these qualities? And it's a very beautiful story. So, I'll let you go back and take a look at that. But we move forward through time into the 30s and into the 50s and into the 60s with developments being made in this field. By the 80s, we had an AI winter, right? So hard to imagine a winter if you don't know that it's booming. But I had very little understanding of what was going on with AI during that time period. I thought it was a recent thing as well. But by the 70s, we already had ELIZA. By the 80s, we already had Japan's fifth generation computer basically defeating other players. You had the rise of machine learning in the early 90s. You already had IBM's Deep Blue beat the world's best chess player in 1997. So it's not a very recent conversation, but the updates to the technology, what it's capable of doing now, is drastically improved. And we had another AI boom in the 2010s. This was when DeepMind's AlphaGo defeated the world's best Go player. That was 2016. And in the present day, we're now looking at LLMs and ethical application in the classroom. We've got conversations about GPT-0 and policing. There's a lot that we have to take into account. But I merely show this to show that it's an ongoing conversation that's been happening for a long time. We just have to correlate those points. Now, this chart was the one that was touted as the most important chart in 100 years. And this was truly the chart that just scared me completely when I saw it at the ASU GSV conference. The person, again, put it up there as the most important chart in 100 years and just explained what I was looking at. I mean, I thought I understood it just looking at that straight shot that goes from 0 all the way to 10 to the 8th power. But that's ChatGPT's launch. That's how many days it took it to get to the number of users that it took Netflix about 3,500 days. So immediately it was the most widely used software or technology just upon launch. And so seeing this chart and understanding that I'd have to rethink what I was at the conference for. See, I was thinking about, how could we curtail AI? How can we work around it? Is there a way of policing it? Is that the more desirable approach? And then I saw this and said, oh, so it's pretty much being used by a majority of the people immediately. That's going to require some new literacy structures. Right now we have prompting and things like that we talk about. We'll get to that. But this chart, amazing that it could do that. And the implications are vast. Now, beyond that, I also was able to look at this chart, which is really just a chart that showcased the sponsors at the event in 2023. So this is April of 2023. And you already had companies in all of these industries integrating AI into their business model already back then. So you can only imagine it's ramped up since then. And there's many, many more companies using AI now. I mean, there's literally everyone is trying to integrate it. And by the time that I went home to write a report on this, AI had already been integrated into Google Documents, Microsoft Word, and a number of other, word processing tools that have been available for a while, but again, that some of us didn't really think about too much. Grammarly is one of those tools that evolved to include AI powers. And so now it's causing a lot of problems for students who were using Grammarly before and were not being flagged for any sort of AI because it wasn't flagging for that before, but now we know that that's the way that things have sort of gone. So these charts were shocking to me. I had to rethink, okay, well then what is this conversation going to actually look like at the classroom level, at the district level? Should we have PD on this thing? How exactly is it going to work? And then we sort of get to this point where I think it's kind of funny to throw in some information about, reputable news sources that are doing the very thing that we're telling our students not to do with the technology. So the Gannett paused an AI experiment where they were using AI to summarize and basically do the work that, again, we would tell our students to do themselves. And this is where we are. This is a new technology. We're learning how to apply it. We're learning how to integrate it into our day to day. Now, rise of AI in education points to a few things. Improved learning outcomes could be a main outcome of using these tools. I say could be. I'll qualify a lot of my statements as I go today, just because it really depends on how we apply our attitudes to the technology, what we bring to the table, how we help our students to perceive it. That's one of the closing points that I'll make. But increased efficiency is also something that you can gain with AI. There's plenty of tools that can allow you to streamline certain processes. Now, in the chart there, I have AI can automate grading tasks. It can't really, no. There are studies being done on AI tools that can grade and do stuff like that. I actually just found an article about GPT-4 doing some reviews and some grading, pretty high quality stuff out in Texas, but STAR testing, and it's very inconsistent with its results, and there's a lot of questions as well. So again, we get into these ethical conversations about usage and how it should be applied. But real-time insights is another thing that we can get from AI. AI data that we pull from our classrooms, how we're using the technology ourselves, student performance indicators. Think of it like a on-the-spot check. Hey, where's my student and how are they doing? That type of stuff is accessible with AI, but it requires that we start to think of AI in that way. I think much of the conversation, though, has been, again, around policing it and curtailing it, not so much this, let's teach them how to use it effectively and ethically. But real-time insights then can be gained. And if you're really concerned with teaching the students that are actually in your classroom, I mean, we know that gathering data of that sort is very difficult to do without superpowered tools like this. So with AI, we might get into a domain where more of this research is accessible to more of us simply because the tools are friendlier for research and for polling and for questioning and for recording, etc. Even summarizing. I mean, right now, the Zoom bot is summarizing everything I'm saying, and later on, you'll get a transcript of it. So those types of things, again, emerge in this conversation of AI. The MLA CCCC document that I linked, this is what I extracted out to really, really understand what was happening with AI, how they were using it. These are the 3 examples that were given, and so I extracted them directly from that document, so you don't have to read it all yourselves. But I did also provide you the exact challenge, AI's role in that conversation, what it was that these grants aimed to do, and what the larger result was. So long story short, graduation rates increased by 5% at Georgia State University. Now, again, review that whole thing on your own later on if you'd like. These are just the key points. At Arizona State University, they started applying AI-powered learning assistants, and what they noted was, pilot users earned higher test scores and completed coursework 20% faster, which is interesting. I'm not so concerned with speed myself. I'm not really trying to speed through, but to know that the work could somehow be amplified is interesting. And then finally, at the University of Michigan, they had AI-powered tools that were providing reliable and valid scores compared to human graders. But a lot of those conversations, again, fall to the wayside when you think about inconsistencies, the fact that you have, if anyone's using even Grammarly, I mean, it's going to get flagged for AI, for plagiarism, etc. So the conversation has to straddle these 2 points of ethical use and plagiarism. Clear policies help with that. But these are just examples then of how it's being applied, how it's being used. And it's a lot of just case studies and looking at possibilities. And it's really a moment of discovery more than anything. There's other successful applications of AI that we could think about as well. virtual classrooms that have AI-powered chatbots, for example, is a huge thing. Because I saw that you can make chatbots with ChatGPT 4, I made a robot. I called it RhetBot, Rhetoric Bot. And its purpose is to answer student questions with rhetorical questions. So students ask it all kinds of questions they would ask ChatGPT, expecting answers, and they get zero answers. They get answers in the form of rhetorical questions that probe for deeper thinking. So that was the nature and the purpose of the bot as I intended it. And so to have this other version of me, or this other voice that sort of reiterates the things that I would want to say in the classroom, but does it passively while my students are at home. Hey, I'm going to go sign in and chat with the bot to ask it some questions. Again, an interesting new use case. Smart content personalization, right? So analyzing student data, but here we get into some ethical concerns, right? Like don't input student names. Student data should not be uploaded to ChatGPT directly, right? There's data privacy issues, a lot of things that we'll get to in just a second. But these are where people are starting to try to apply the technology and how they're thinking about using it in the classroom. Again, remote learning could be empowered by these chatbots if we had, and now they even have, again, I have my whole desk right here is full of a bunch of case studies, but there's one that was on let me see if I can find this one, because this one's worth exploring. We have teaching now of educators, TAs, that are learning how to teach. And I remember my first day teaching. It was nerve-wracking. And I actually ran into my professor, my former master professor, who, before I went into that first classroom, gave me some words of encouragement that I definitely needed. Here, what we have is a situation where GPT is what was created, and it's interactive teaching assistant training with GPT-based students. So now you're talking about students in the classroom that are AI bodies, and the teacher reacting to those students to train them in how to respond to real students. So new studies that are emerging. This one literally came out of Stanford a few days ago. So it's all about staying on top of what the UCs, CSUs, the community colleges across different areas are doing. And these are a few of those things. Next slide. So tools that have integrated AI, making it very difficult for us to not use it in some capacity. I mean, you could say, don't hit the little button with the 3 stars there. But most tools are getting that little button. Just use it is going to become a default for a lot of students if they don't know any better, if we're not clear about our expectations, etc. But Grammarly, again, is a tool that has integrated AI. Pro Writing Aid is another tool. Hemingway, Google Docs, Microsoft Word, all word processors essentially have some form of it. I was looking at Padlet just earlier. AI is now integrated into Padlet. There's all these old tools that are moving in new directions because of these technologies. Now, this is where I get a little more excited now as a rhetorician, as a fan of language and discourse and literacy. So I immediately thought of, well, if AI is rising in writing, we have to start to think about this as a rhetorician would. And so what is the potential here? What are the abilities that I gain? What are the pros, the cons, right? Are there new techniques now for writing? And in fact, there are. Are there new writing styles and new genres? Well, it seems there are emerging styles, genres, or call them literacies. But the point here is that, yes, all of this is now in mind, and anyone who's a fan of language communication, how we use it, has to account for AI as part of that conversation. Now, prompting is the key literacy that everyone is becoming more familiar with. So I cite here the example of 29-year-old Anna, who was the only AI prompter. And so she was making a nice figure of $335,000 a year in this new prompting writing style. So she explains what she was doing, and it's exactly what we would be doing now when we go into the bot and prime it. So, hey, do this before you do that. 6-figure job. Again, new literacies will emerge, new strategies will be used in the traditional workplace. And a lot of what's happening here, I mean, students are going to be expected to know how AI works. I can tell you with absolute certainty that there's already major companies that have integrated AI through Jasper AI or other such paid tools. I mean, we're talking about big companies, some of the ones that I showed you in that very first slide. So they're using the technology, they're providing it for their employees, they're giving training for these tools. And so I'm glad that we're having these PD sessions here and that we can talk about all this collectively, kind of showcase our own perspectives on it. But there is sort of two conversations happening with AI, the academic conversation and the professional conversation. I like to point out this link that I have here just because of what it provides. And so if you click on this, you'll see that this is a full prompt engineering guide that walks you through everything from basic application to prompt tuning to tooling to vocabulary reference to it's all here. This is a master tool for how do you use AI? How do you master this literacy? What is the ethos of it? What's the philosophy of it, et cetera? So that's there for your review. I hope you'll kind of scan it. It's a lot of content, a lot of information. So take your time with it, but definitely see what is being done with it, what the prompting looks like, so you can start to figure out how to prompt or how to prime more efficiently. Now, at this point, I like to dive into what is the GPT thing? What is the LLM exactly? How does it work? There's a lot of questions about what it can and cannot do, and that is, I think, a starting point for this. So LLMs like ChatGPT are designed to generate human-like text based on patterns they learn from vast amounts of data. So they're not really remembering anything. Right. ChatGPT's data set includes just a large body of data that's been used to train it. For a while, it was only restricted to 2021 data. Then it was allowed 2022 data. I think at this point, it's at 2023 data. But the point is, what it sees is what was shown to it. It's a data set, right? You have to feed it what it can see. The other thing that it does is it learns the underlying patterns of discourse, basically. That's really what it's doing when it's filling in the blank for the next word. So this is essentially how it works. Then it sees that there's a maze of ideas and words, and it tries to find that one path, the underlying patterns. If I say, I want to go to, it's probably going to throw a location in next, right? It's not going to throw in croissant. I want to go to croissant. That's not what it's going to say. That would be inaccurate. But it would say a location because that makes sense, right? In the patterns of discourse, I want to go to would be followed with a location. That's what it's doing at the end of the day, in a nutshell. Now, if you understand how we form sentences and how we convey meaning and how meaning can be altered with context, then you've got the tools that you need to make great use of this technology. That's at least the argument that I've been making, trying to develop and build out for myself as I try to use the free tools to achieve some of what you can do with the paid tools. It's in the prompting, it's in the priming, it's in the commanding back and forth that you can get to those types of results. Now, its purpose then is not to memorize anything. It's not memorizing, storing, or remembering all this data or any specific information. It's literally generating it every time you ask the question. It learns the underlying patterns of discourse then, which means that learning those yourself is a great thing to do. It gives you a little bit of an advantage in using this tool. How it crafts its responses, if you wanted a very direct example, again, I pointed to Google as a case in point. But why do cats? Why do cats purr? Why do cats purr when? Why do cats purr when they're when they're happy? And so, you could have at any point substituted very different words, and that sentence would continue in very different ways. So this is essentially a very simplified explanation of what it's doing. Right? So ChatGPT doesn't retrieve pre-written answers, but generates a response based on the patterns that it's learned. It predicts what word should come next in a sentence, one word at a time, until it forms a complete answer. So that's, in general, how it works. Now, some of the issues then. Data privacy, like we talked about. Privacy concerns arise when you're talking about anything related to student data, student information. So, definitely get approval before you use any sort of student work in any of these AI machines, if you do at all, which I don't recommend. I have mostly been working with models that are generated. If I have it do stuff like feedback or corrections, it's work that it has produced in itself. Or you can change names or find ways of protecting student data. But the point is, you don't want it as part of this large data set that the ChatGPT will retain and be able to tap into as it generates new text. Uh, Equity and accessibility are also becoming a big conversation point because AI can perpetuate existing biases and create inequalities among students and institutions, especially when we get to conversations about who gets to use it, who's provided, for example, a GPT-4 versus a free 3.5 access. How do we integrate these things into the classroom? Should we? What is their benefit? What is their detriment? So we need to have this conversation about equity and accessibility as it comes to AI. Another great article that I have here in front of me is related to GPT-4's image recognition now being a very, very powerful tool for anyone who is blind but wants to see what's on the page. So the alt text that's generated by ChatGPT-4 is excellent. So again, how can it be used to improve equity and accessibility become questions that we can ask once we frame it in that way. But it has to be framed that way. And to get to that type of framing, I think training and integration is the next thing, right? So we're all here talking about what we've done with it, how we've experienced it. We'll take some questions in a few minutes about your perspectives on it. But where you are with it is where you have to begin, right? So if you've taken a look at it, if you haven't, if you are familiar with how to use it, if you're not, are some of your students, are they asking questions? And these ultimately become my guiding principles. Now, more concerned. Using Gen AI in education, again, ethical considerations, plagiarism. Are we stealing from our students the ability for them to think critically by allowing them to use this technology that spits out some great sentences? I don't believe so because of what I have constantly relied on with project-based learning and flipped classrooms and a lot of different strategies, teaching strategies, pedagogies that we've been talking about for a while as we've adapted to the pandemic, as we've come out of the pandemic and had to get back in the classroom. This whole same energy of transformation is what I've applied to AI in the classroom. And so definitely take those ethical considerations seriously. And students will raise them as well. I mean, there are plenty of students that I know that will say, I will not touch this stuff. And that's a great attitude to have if it comes with a good understanding that a lot of this stuff is going to be commonplace. A lot of these workplaces, these employers are going to expect that you have some form of understanding of AI literacy. So we also get to the idea of representation, which is why I started off by saying that it can only see what you show it. And so one of the examples of that is, if I'm generating AI artwork and I put, the teacher at the front of the classroom talking to the students, it won't be a teacher that looks like me unless I add some cues to the prompt, like brown or Latin, glasses, and a beard. And then it'll give you something sort of like me. But if I just generated it initially, of course, it can see what it's been granted before. And so we have to focus on human-centered AI. My colleagues who have been champions of humanizing online, I think would agree in this particular case. It's the same sort of ethos now applied to this technology. As far as tools and resources, because we are coming up here to the end of the actual presentation, and we'll have some time here for Q&A and discussion and any questions. I wanted to pull out the risks. Specifically, I wanted to show what it was that in that MLA document, which is linked right here, so you have access to the whole thing. What were the risks that people were really focused on in this work group? And so the risks were pretty big. I mean, there was risk to teachers, there was risk to students, there was risk to programs and profession. And so to take a look at some of those, you'd see that students may miss writing, reading, and thinking practice because they submit generative AI outputs as their own work, or depend on Gen AI summaries of text rather than reading. Absolutely, that's a key concern, right? Students may not see writing or language study as valuable since machines can mimic these skills. And that's true too. Students may experience an increased sense of alienation and mistrust if surveillance and detection approaches meant to ensure academic integrity are undertaken. Such approaches could have been proven unreliable and biased. They can produce false positives that could lead to wrongful accusations, resulting in negative consequences for the students. So we want to show them that we're on their side. I mean, this is an emerging conversation for all of us, and you're certainly not being policed if you're being taught how to use it ethically and effectively. Many students face increased linguistic distance because of LLM. The LLMs can promote uncritical normative reproduction of standardized English. And so this is, again, based on the language that it is presented, the standard edited English that is the commonplace language of business. Some of us call it the language of power. And so this is exactly what it defaults to. And so slang and other type of communication are not as valued, they're not as emphasized. Students may have unequal access to most elite tools, and some students and institutions will be able to purchase more sophisticated versions. And this is where we get to the equity issue. You know, how do we ensure that everyone has access to these tools, or are we somehow creating a gap, a literacy gap, much akin to what happened in the early days of the internet? Now, risk to teachers could include, being asked to make significant changes to your practice without adequate time. And again, here we are crunching in some PD to make sure that we're on top of what's going on with this thing. So we need to acknowledge that it takes a lot of time to really master these tools, and not all of us have the time to devote to it. Teachers may lack adequate support and up-to-date training to understand LLMs as they relate to our disciplines. If the conversation defaults to let's police it and let's ban it in the classroom, then you can't talk about creative application or positive ways that you might use the tech. Teachers will need to spend time and energy developing critical AI literacy, which will divert their attention away from other teaching practices and course content, unless adequate resources are given. So I think even this presentation and the districts and Laura Pachenko here, who has played an integral role in this 6-part series as well, like this is partly a response to that, saying, you know what? Okay, PD is essential. So let's put more information out there. Let's have candid conversations. Let's have presentations. Let's have student panels. Let's have teacher panels. Let's have any creative who's working with the tech for writing or art or anything like that. Let's have a conversation about all of it. Now, the risk of the programs in the profession is interesting as well. The public view of writing a language study may be seen as less valuable since machines can mimic these skills. Now, I would contend this, but it was a concern listed. Institutions may struggle to plan and provide for the kind of labor and resources needed to meaningfully respond to these challenges. Academic values around giving credit to sources may be compromised because LLMs are always deceiving us about who said what and giving us quotes that are not really belonging to the person who supposedly said them. Hallucinations are still a thing. Uneven access to AI text generators may increase inequities. Now, again, I'm looking at it from the standpoint of the teacher who decides, I'm going to teach you how to use this ethically and morally, versus the one who says, don't look. And so which is more likely to create a form of inequity regarding AI literacy? I would imagine the second example, since the first example is giving examples, priming, discussing, critically addressing the technology. Down here at the bottom, academic administrators may seek to increase class sizes or modify workloads based on perceived efficiencies created by AI. This has the potential of affecting jobs in areas that support or require writing instruction and support. And that's an absolutely fair concern. One of those that I think is misguided as far as what should we be doing with these tools. Any form of efficiency and time saving that we get as teachers in the classroom who are already spread thin, working with so many students one-on-one, it shouldn't be, you were a little more productive? Great, here's more students to work with then. No, we know the statistics on class sizes and grad programs with smaller class sizes and class caps and all of that. I don't personally believe that's where the conversation should go, but it could. And so we have to address those points that were made by the joint group here. And finally, reliance on AI-generated analysis and writing by scholars can undermine the wide range of research practices, including research writing and peer review that characterize scholarship. And that is a concern, again. related to the academic currencies that we have with citations and credit and things like that. Now, I had to be fair, so I had pulled out the benefits as well. And I'm happy to say that the benefits seemed for me to outweigh the negatives. And when I share my course policy in a second, you'll also see that 90% of those concerns that were risks are addressed in some way by that policy. Now, my policy is not the end all be all, but it is part of hundreds of policies that I reviewed before I wrote mine. It's actually, my policy is included in that handout that's been roaming around that has hundreds of people in it. I think that needs to be reviewed well, right? Take a look at all the different examples. Basically, take it on yourself, take it on with your district, take it on with your colleagues, at least begin the conversations. Now, what are the benefits for language instruction then? Language students can use LLMs to create translations that include explanations and wording options. That's absolutely true. That's a great way of understanding what someone said in a different context. Simplify it for me. Hey, explain that to a 5-year-old now, because I need to understand it really simplistically. Translate that into Spanish for me. Translate that into a different language that I speak, because that will help me to understand it more fully. These are also things that the LLMs can do. Language students can develop expertise even while using generative AI, although it may be used to produce a rough draft of a translation. Refining such translations will still require knowledge about language choices, especially with literary works. So the idea here would be, excuse me, at no point should we encourage copy-paste. But if it provides an outline or a proposal or something that you're okay with students generating with AI, but you still require a revision, you still tell them, do more work with that than what the AI gave you. And those are ways that you can start to weave in the technology a little bit. At this point, I've started using it to work with peer review for some of my students. A student from last semester and I worked on a priming 2-step process, basically, that gives feedback without rewriting your work. So it was great to work with a student on that, and he takes the larger credit for what he told, how he primed it, and I ended up revising it a little bit. But yeah, it's one of those things that working with students to collaborate on ways to use AI is a new thing, but it goes to the democratic classroom ethos that I've always tried to set. Language students can ask LLMs to, again, generate questions in another language. Language teachers can use Gen AI to quickly come up with examples as well. There's tools like Magic School AI and EduAid and a few others that have come out that now allow you on the spot examples. Oh, you didn't bring your examples to class today because you were running late because you dropped off your kid? Okay, on the spot, generate some examples that will work and be of a certain quality for students to then review and respond to. And so it's these little things that I'm most excited about, and I've used it in those ways. Benefits for literary studies. Students can use LLMs as instruments for creative wordplay, so diction choices. Students with a range of technical expertise can use LLMs, which can be prompted to produce code. I mean, at this point, only GPT-4 does a really good coding. And we go back to that conversation then about, equity and accessibility. And so who will be the great coders of tomorrow? Well, a lot of them will be relying on AI technology, it seems. Teachers can train and prompt LLMs to respond to specific literary passages as an aid to class discussions. I actually have a live example to share. It was Valentine's Day not too long ago. And in the classroom, I shared Sonnet 116 with my class, which, if you've read, is in a very symbolic language, right? It's got a lot loaded in or implied that I wanted to make explicit. And so I went over work. We went over it line by line. We translated every line. We did the typical work that we've always done with Sonnet 116 in every class that I've ever taught. The one difference was that at the end of that activity, I had the AI do the same thing in front of all my students, and it took it like 30 seconds to do everything we had just done in the classroom. But then we had a great conversation about, well, you can do the same work. It just takes you a little longer, but it's worth taking your time to do it yourself because these machines can't reason. It's your responses, it's your writing, it's your ideas, it's your voice that still matters here. So please don't relegate the writing to the machine. We have these types of conversations constantly in my class because students are starting to ask questions like, Well, what's an author? What's an author then? What is a writer? In the age of AI and writing with AI, what is a writer? It's a great question. Now, benefits for writing instruction are great as well if you look at the ways that we can apply it. But for the sake of time, I'll let you sort of go over those yourself. Great stuff to review, all addressed in that MLA CCC document. First, policy then. This is the policy that I shared with my colleagues at my college, and I've been sharing with anybody who is writing their own policy. Again, it's not the end all be all of policies, but it does address what I found to be the key concerns. Furthermore, it provides clarity for my students about what is allowed and what is not allowed. And so artificial intelligence is one of the emerging Web3 tools that promises to shake up both the academic and professional landscape. And I think these conversations that we've been having are a testament to that, regardless of how you feel about it. And people have a lot of varying feelings on this matter. Learning to use it well is an emerging and a valuable skill. That being said, you can expect to use AI in my classes. You'll be using ChatGPT and you'll be using Midjourney AI at a minimum. Please be aware though, and here these warnings are the ones that address the concerns in the MLA CCCC document. If you provide minimum prompts, you'll get low quality results. You will need to refine your prompts. You will need to achieve better outcomes. This will take work. And so the idea still remains on revision. It still remains on, okay, that's what the machine output, but what did you then do with it? Did you just copy paste it? Well, that's plagiarism. What did you do with it? How did you make use of that, right? Number two, don't trust anything it says. Assume facts it gives you are wrong unless you know the answer or can check it with another source. You will be responsible for any errors or omissions provided by the tool. It works best for topics that you understand. That was my way of sort of curtailing this whole, let's use an LLM the same way that we've used a search engine. They're not the same thing at all. They're not meant to do the same thing either. And so, no, you shouldn't Google it in ChatGPT. It may hallucinate and tell you some stuff that isn't accurate. So you should be very cautious and review this work. Again, the emphasis is not on just submit what it put out, but it's up to you to review it and to stand behind what you submit. You shouldn't be submitting work that you've never vetted, that you haven't reviewed, and that you are not confident in submitting. And so this policy alone, point number two, addresses many of those concerns about, well, wait, how will it be used? And finally, the last one, in the absence of a clear method for citation, which we are leaning towards now, there's still not the official end-all be-all. This was my solution, again, a year ago when I created this policy. Any use of AI tools must be acknowledged. So we're not mincing words here, people. If you used it, you let me know. But please be sure to include a paragraph at the end of any assignment that uses AI. And I want you to tell me what you used it for by giving me the exact prompt that you put in. What was your input? And the exact output. Copy paste in this case into what I will use as a sort of works cited document, an additional AI citation for your work that just shows me the inputs and outputs. And so having students just do that extra step is a way of letting them know, I know about this stuff, I'm using it myself. Please be cautious in how you use it, but please learn to use it ethically and well. And so this, again, was adapted from the different policies that are included in that. It's a document that was created by Dr. Ethan Mollick and his wife. It's Mollick and Mollick, and there's hundreds of policies. So review those and see which sit best with you, and which sit best with the goals of your institutions and your district. And yes, academic freedom is part of that conversation too, but there should be a sort of united front here on how we're using it, is at least my argument. Now, a few more things here to conclude then, and then we'll get some questions going. AI is becoming increasingly prevalent in education. It is. It has the potential to transform teaching and learning, but it also poses challenges that should be addressed. It's not all pros. There are many cons. Two, AI should be used responsibly and ethically. key emphasis there is on should, and it will not be if students are not taught how to use it ethically and well. If we police it, if that's our go-to, then we're definitely not addressing concern number two. Number three, AI can be a powerful tool for improving learning outcomes and efficiency. Can be, but not necessarily. Again, if you're not using it that way, if you don't frame usage of it that way, if you do not see where it can assist you, choose not to see rather where it can assist you, I think that would be the main concern. So have you used the technology would be point number one. Point number four, their last point is that AI can become a powerful tool for equity. Again, can, but not will, and certainly not on its own. So we need to get ahead of this thing. And speaking with different bodies, different groups, I can see that everyone's having a similar conversation just across the board. And so it's good to be here as part of that conversation is where I stand. So I thank you all for joining me and for listening to what I had to say regarding my own uses of AI, my definition of what it is, how it will work as part of this Web3 landscape that's emerging. And this was, again, a presentation number one. There will be others. So my name is Rodrigo Gomez. You can find my email there attached below my face, my mugshot there. I do have a immersive web space that you can go to at spatial.io called The Syllaverse. So you can check that out. And we will have other presentations. This was the first of a series of 6. And so the next one will cover mastering AI, so going more deep into the prompting techniques, which are just surveyed here. Art from Words, which will be about crafting art with AI. And that one will be co-presented with my colleague, Josh Alley, who's an art history professor. April 5th is Community Day, so we'll actually be doing an in-person event where I'll give a recap of AI Demystified to start the day off, but then we'll have a student panel with students who are in my class. If you have students in your classrooms that you think would be great for a panel or that would want to be part of it, I'd love to add them in, and we can expand this discussion, make sure that it includes the whole district. Is the point of having teamed up here with the Institutional Innovation and Effectiveness Office at STCCD. And 2 more, you have Navigating the AI Landscape, which will be April 19th. And for that one, I'm planning on bringing in companies that are actually using AI to talk to people about how they're using it and why and to what capacity. And then finally, May 3rd, we'll have AI and Web3 to showcase AI in the conversation of Web3 as a whole, which includes other technologies, but this is the one that really has been at the forefront. So that's it. The last slide that I have here is a suggestion for anyone who is working on anything related to AI, doing anything, any form of writing, data, questionnaires, polls, and you want to reflect on it in writing. We're going to be putting out the Inside English magazine later this year. And so I'd love for colleagues from all around the district, different states in a global capacity even, to chime in and join that conversation. And if you have students that want to publish in the magazine, absolutely we'll welcome them as well. But at this point then, I thank you for your time. I'll defer to the questions. I see some stuff in the chat, so I'm going to pass it to Laura.
Thank you so much, Rodrigo. This has been so interesting. So we got a couple of comments in the chat. Chris, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, this is Chris Rogers with Online Learning Pathways, Instructional Design Coordinator. I just want to mention that there was one part where Rodrigo was talking about some of the pain points regarding AI. And I just made a comment in the chat for people that didn't read it. I just said, I disagree. The importance of proper education and what we teach and how to properly write is even more important in the age of AI. If you don't have any understanding of good writing principles, let alone the topic that you're writing about, you will have no idea how to properly prompt ChatGPT or any LLM. I guarantee that any faculty member that's on this call, if you give any time with ChatGPT for the level of experience that you're at, guaranteed the student will be at that same level. You will easily find how automatic ChatGPT is, can produce written content. It wouldn't be hard to figure out when somebody's plagiarizing something or not. It's only when someone that is properly educated, understands how to write properly, understands the topic that they have, that they can get quality output out of ChatGPT. So it's just saying that education and what we do here is just as much importance with artificial intelligence.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with you at all. I don't know what you were disagreeing with in the comment there, but I was not suggesting that what you said now is not the case. Part of the reason that I related it all back to rhetoric is that very point. As a rhetorician, you understand how meaning is created via language, and that is what can make you a great prompter. But you do have to understand basic syntax, sentence structure, how to expand upon your points, how to describe well. Absolutely gives you a leg up to already have that literacy. I would say, though, that the idea that you cannot spot, or sorry, that it would be easily caught, could be a little misconstrued. I know I use it to produce writing that is unique all the time. Writing that people wouldn't be able to tell is AI
I'm
writing
saying
at all.
but you're an English professor. You have that level of understanding. I'm just saying from a level of a student, we're going to assume that as this level of the student, I'm going to assume is on the same level of the faculty member that does not know or have the level of understanding that you have now. So the quality and level of orientation that they have not been trained upon, and the quality of prompts that they're going to get generic output that can easily be trained once a faculty member understands the base level of what these LLMs generate. And then I have one more point I could explain. If you could go back to the negative sides of AI, that slide, I could explain where I was going.
Yeah, for sure. Let me go back to that slide 1 second. Let's see. Was it risks here, correct?
Risk to students.
Mhm.
Yeah, this is the one where I sat there and said, it was like, this is the one that stood out to me. Students may miss writing, reading, and thinking in practice because they surveyed generative AI outputs. It was the trouble here, I guess, where I'm trying to go here with it's, and there's a lot of faculty and people have concerns about AI and they want to police it and everything else. But I think the trouble is if we don't sit here and embrace it, you fall into the trap of letting AI do the thinking for students, replace thinking, because that's at the core. And if our role is to show how AI can enhance our own thinking and to be able to think and create, I mean, in my writing, I would have to actually say, as far as my own experimentation with ChatGPT and everything else, it's made me even more passionate and understanding as far as my own shortcomings in my own writing practice, and has wanted me to improve my own writing style even more, because I understand what I give and what I get back from it. It serves as your own digital intern or coach, to where I could have Rodrigo. I don't have, like, if I'm taking Rodrigo's class right now, I don't have him 24/7 to be able to understand his level of expertise in showing me how to write better. But if Rodrigo gave me the foundation to understand and use AI to replace when he's not there, it could provide a tremendous benefit in improving our writing for our students.
So I want to say that you and I are in complete agreement then, and you were disagreeing with the point that I also disagreed with.
Yeah.
Students can miss writing, reading, and thinking practice if they are not taught to use it in this way, whereby we're showing them our use even and what we're doing with it. Because if they know that you haven't touched the stuff, it may turn out that they're even ahead of some of the teachers in the classroom.
It's true.
And that was kind of Chris's point, that they would be on par. In some cases, the student in the room who's entering will have higher understanding or more understanding of AI because they've been put in situations where they either had to understand it or had to use it professionally. And so then imagine the educator who says, well, actually, I don't know what it can do. And so this is what I'm saying should not be the approach. We need to know what it can do. We need to play with it like we would play with any new toy, right? Take chances, make mistakes, get messy is what Ms. Frizzle always said to me from the Magic School Bus. And I live by that with any new technologies that emerge. It's like, how can we learn how it truly functions? How can we empower students to use this tech, but with an understanding that there are concerns? And so I think what Chris and I are both getting at is that there is a need for AI literacy.
Perfect. Thank you. Yeah, that's exactly where I was at. We're on the same page.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Yeah. I think Tony's got a hand, or I don't know if there was somebody in the chat. Laura, I'll let you kind of call it.
We just got another question, but if someone has their hand up, feel free to jump in.
Go ahead, Tony.
Okay, so let me preface my comments by saying that I'm a newcomer to this, which is why thanks to Rodrigo for doing this. For those of us who, are trying to figure this out, I guess, my first, I liked having the policy that you wrote up. And I guess my first response to this is, it's when I hear about AI and all these sorts of things, it seems to me that we're being a little bit naive about this. There's a big difference between an educator who, knows how to write and is grading people's writing and all that sort of thing using, AI, and a student. And okay, so, the gentleman before said it was enhancing his writing. Okay, cool. Okay, but I think in some ways we have to remember that we're dealing with students who are just learning how to write. And this technology, all technologies typically start as a good idea. And then it turns to something that we didn't count on. And now we have to try and, pull the reins on it. And I think this is exactly one of those things. And so, I mean, you want the idea of teaching them to use it responsibly, to me, also seems to be naive. The thing is it's going to get more powerful. Rodrigo, you mentioned a minute ago that you use it to create unique writings. Okay. Most of the students that I've taught over the last 30 some years are going to think of this as a panacea. They're just going to use it. Okay. And, you can say, you got to tell me how you used it, but, as it gets more powerful, I think it's going to be out of our hands, to be able to do any kind of evaluation on these things. And, the other thing, and maybe Rodrigo can speak about this if you know about it, but I've been hearing these like nightmarish things about how it's being used in different professions, right? Things like lawyers using it to write briefs for them. And the thing is citing, case law that doesn't exist. I mean, this is nonsense. But, it's not going to go away, right? So, I don't know. I'm always feeling like, I don't want to get into it, but it's going to, be here, and you got to do something about it.
I appreciate your point about some naivete, mostly because I agree that to have walked into the conference that I walked into with the perspective that I had was the naive perspective that I quickly had to do away with as I realized, oh, this is really just integrating into everything. And to Tony's point, improving drastically with every iteration. Never mind what ChatGPT 5 will be able to do. But I think the one place where I might contend with your point about it can eventually get so good that you won't be able to spot it. If you look at the third step in that 3-part policy, it doesn't matter how good the AI becomes. They would be giving me the input and the output that was produced by the AI. And because I know for a fact from being a user that once it generates, you can click one button and Control V, that there's no reason that they shouldn't give me the exact output, not a summary of output, not a, hey, I forgot to include it. Then your assignment doesn't count because I have no idea if this is plagiarized or not. I need to know with certainty what you did with the AI is sort of how I put it on them. It's the same way that I tell them, look, if it makes any mistakes because you don't know any better, well, you should never have submitted work that you did not vet, that you did not research, that you did not understand, that you could not correct. So that's the one little saving grace that I think we have there with the inputs and outputs. It's, hey, listen, if the paper that I produced was a grad level quality response, but I know it was produced by the machine, that's not your work. That's plagiarism.
So let me ask you, Rodrigo, real quick. So regarding that particular policy, So if I'm a student and I give you the prompt, that I used, if you put that same prompt in your computer, are you going to get the exact same thing that the student got? No.
It'll be close. It'll be as close as it could be to the general response that the machine would give, but it will not be verbatim. It is sometimes if you ask the exact same question, because it just is like, I just answered this for you. But if you're asking it to write it in a specific style, you can always just tell it to adjust tone, to adjust what you need to. But I want to take it back before we pass it to Jeff, to your point, though, and what Chris also said. It's knowing about audience, purpose, context, tone, voice, all of these things that we talk about in writing, communication, language use, right? What is meaning? How does all that work? That is the foundation of what we have to be teaching still as language instructors, because it turns out it makes you a better prompter. That's just a little perk. But the goal should still be that you can generate clearly in writing the ideas that you need to generate, that you can organize, and that you can apply a higher order thinking to these essays, books, stories, poems, whatever we're working with. And so I guess one final little point there would be how cool is it when you have no resources of your own? Maybe I forgot a student response that I really wanted to share with the class. To have your prompt and then on the spot tell ChatGPT, generate a response for this that is of appropriate level. And there it is. And then reverse engineer that with your students. What did it do that is effective? What did it do that is ineffective? Was this a response that would be appropriate? What would we grade it? What do we like or dislike about it? Those types of questions about work that it generates can also lead to discussion. Who's the author of this piece is a question that my students came up with when we first started using ChatGPT in the classroom. And just philosophically, it's very difficult to explain that technically it's a machine just pulling words. So who's the author? Sort of the collective data set, I suppose. Maybe it's the author of the question that leads to the response. But the point is, they're now having to think about, what is writing? Like, what is it really? And how do we use it? And what is it for? And those are the questions I've always wanted them to really dive deep into, because now we can talk about the value of literacy, the value of words. So I make the ChatGPT stuff secondary. We spend most of our time on syntax, sentence structures, grammar, rhetorical strategies. And then we use ChatGPT on the side to amplify all that stuff. So absolutely, I agree with Tony and Chris. It needs to be about those basic skills, those basic communication skills, and more advanced than that. But I mean, just soft skills, language practices. And on that note, actually, if I might share one title here, I read this great article that I would recommend. It's called "When Your Technical Skills Are Eclipsed, Your Humanity Will Matter More Than Ever." And there's an article that was put out by the New York Times recently about all these technological ways that the AI is great, but how the soft skills, the communication, what we're doing now, even this back and forth where we can respectfully agree or disagree and engage in discourse, that is going nowhere. That is invaluable even in the age of AI. So that's what we should lean back on then. Okay, these soft skills, communication, language, rhetoric, all of those things that I was already doing in my literary classroom, in my language arts classroom, that you can do in any classroom because all subjects require words, engagement with words. So how can you use it, I think, is the question here. I hope I'm not being redundant there. And I know that Jeff had a question or came up earlier. I don't know if we have any other questions in the chat, but thanks for that.
Yeah, hi, thank you. Well, the plagiarism thing, I know it's an issue, but from my understanding, and I've experimented with this, I do some with ChatGPT, it spits out something, it comes back 99% probability it's AI. Then I feed it back in and give it some prompts that tell it specific things, and then it fools the AI. Right? So I think getting caught up on the arms race of is it plagiarism or not is, I don't know, say misguided, but almost like not where the resources and time should be spent. So is that true that the arms race is on and you can fake any one of those AI generators just from, I found that to be true, but from your experience, Rodrigo, is that actually really solid true? Like most kids
100
can take advantage.
Yes. So sorry to cut you off. I was just eager to say 100% yes.
Okay, all right.
Part of the reason that Turnitin.com turned off their plagiarism AI checker was that they turned it on with no one's permission. They just did it on their own. And people got to use it. And so then they were like, wait a minute, this thing's telling me how much of this writing is plagiarized, much the same as it would tell you how much is plagiarized from online content before. Now it was just looking for AI cues. But to your point, Jeff, it can be fooled. It can certainly be fooled. A lot of the studies that are coming out, including this one that I was reading earlier about the STAR testing in Texas, it just points out to the inconsistencies in usage. You can see here that I did attach a link to GPT-0 in my presentation. It is there. I personally am against this use of this thing because of how it's being talked about. Again, people are not so aware that you can fool it or that you can generate. Listen, students that are using Grammarly are getting flagged for AI, and all they're doing is switching one word for another. How accurate is it going to be becomes the main question. And so I agree with you. That's the wrong place to put our energies.
So then I would follow up would be also, isn't it true that you could be flagged as a student for using AI and then you have no recourse to say, what are you talking about? You relied on an AI thing to tell me mine was AI and you're trusting that, but you're not trusting my work, right? So I think there's no recourse for students that get called out by someone that they may be wrong. It may not be true.
Exactly.
And that could have consequences for the student that are unintended. And I don't think the student really has any credibility, and no one's going to believe the student ever, right? Like, so absolutely. I think that could be unfair. And then how it's changed everything in just such a brief period of time. Aren't we really like, it's already over? Like, just as educators, you just have to get used to the fact that a decade from now, whatever you think the model you were granted, it's gone. Like, because all that really matters is I work as a vocational specialist for the district. So my job is to get students jobs. And as an educator, I think that's what's important. We can teach whatever, but if a student can't get a job and have the skills that are that the speed of business is moving at 10 years from now, no one's going to care about what your law degree is. If you have a law degree and you're using chat, like, why would I pay the guy that's doing it all by hand and he's billing me by the hour when I can pay the guy that's using the AI and it's just revolutionized everything? So I almost feel like education in general has just been blown up, and our focus on, like, I know how to do times tables in math, but I never do that. And no one ever says when they ask me what the tip is, oh, you cheater, you used your phone. So I'm just saying, I think we're already here now. And I think the faster you can get on board with, that's just going to change everything. And we don't have to worry about those issues anymore. That you just need to teach the kids how to use it, how to get along with it. And, you know, if kids are going to cheat, they're going to cheat. And, you know, AI didn't invent students trying to get away with doing less work.
Yeah, I
guess that's my 2 cents on the subject.
No, I would agree with you largely about the sort of attitude that you're taking on. Like, it really should be something that I spent most of my presentation arguing we should go the other way. People don't police it, but really let's educate, let's show how to use well. And it will improve. It will get better. Those things are undoubted. No doubt it will. It's already done it. It's already provably true that it can do that. As it gets better and better, it'll be able to do even more stuff, and it'll get more able to trick our tests. And already you're seeing things with Sora AI coming out where you can now take words and create what are essentially deep fake videos that look pretty damn good. So I think you're right, Jeff, that we have to train our students for our modern markets, which will include AI in the workplace. I mean, here we could already say AI has entered the academic workplace, but I could tell you again with certainty that AI has entered the professional workplace. And so there's always been this sort of dual conversation between what's the academic way and then what's the professional way, because they don't always overlap. For other work that I do or freelance work that I do, I'll use AI to generate some of the work to streamline my time, but I make sure that the quality is there so that it's not like this was AI generated. No, I revised it, I improved it, I molded it into what I wanted it to be because I'm still the composer. I'm still composing, I'm still organizing, outlining, revising, brainstorm, doing all of those things that a rhetorician should do. And so I really aim to tell my students, look, this is just a new discourse, and we've had to learn plenty of those. We had to learn the internet. We had to learn social media. We had to learn Padlet and Nearpod and Classcraft and even whatever LMS you're using now. Some of us were using Blackboard, then we had to use Moodle, then we had to use whatever you're using now. So we're always learning new tools, always learning new literacies. I think this would be akin to that conversation. And I agree with you wholeheartedly. I heard this quote. It's not a great quote. I don't particularly like saying it, but I see myself agreeing more and more with this quote. It goes, AI will not replace you. Someone using AI will replace you. And again, as a power user, let's say, I can understand what that means. And to Jeff's point, he also understands what that means, that there will be these users that are just natives to the technology the same way that we have digital natives now. And they're going to just be able to do drastically more with this technology. But our job then is still the same. Educate, communicate, inform, give opportunities for creative use, give opportunities for problematizing usage. Hey, go use AI to do this, this, and that. Or, hey, I usually have this assignment. How can I improve it with AI or challenge students more with AI? This presentation is a final case in point. It was put together using AI. I then spruced it up, but the whole skeleton, it took Gamma like 15 seconds to generate an outline of this presentation. And then I included additional materials and I rewrote some of the ideas and I embedded my quotes and all the things that I wanted to. But let's just say the process was very, very fast by comparison to the work that I've done before. So this is just another example then of how can it make you more efficient? Well, it can, but Gamma is also a tool that will be paid. And so now we get to that point of, okay, what can you use the free technology for if we don't want to turn our students into consumers? And at that point, I'd say you got to teach them AI literacy. You have to teach them how to use the base prompting skill with the free bot. And that's the best way. And it's not perfect, but it's the best way that I can see just going forward as a user, as a teacher, as an individual. Cool. I think we may have reached the time here. Let's see. Any other questions that you see?
So Denise shared an article going back to the discussion about AI detection and potential issues. There's an article that AI detectors are biased against non-native English writers. So that would be great for everyone to check out. And then Stephanie had asked a question about whether there are any plans for longer term or immersive professional development that's attached to compensation. And so I mentioned that we do have some workshops coming up. Dulce had mentioned too an interest in classroom policies. So be on the lookout, everyone. We're definitely going to be doing some hands-on workshops coming up in the near future here. And we definitely can look into more opportunities for exploring AI and how we can implement it. I don't know if you want to say anything to that, Rodrigo, but that's kind of a summary of some of the additional chat comments.
For sure. I'll just say really quickly that, yeah, we do have a workshop series that actually will address that very point as the first point. So it's on AI classroom policy. So we'll be doing that. I believe it's Tuesday, right, Laura?
That's correct.
And so, yeah, please attend. We'll set up the virtual Zoom anyway, maybe do it on Zoom if you guys can't make it in person. But the goal would be to have these workshops be hands-on. So anybody who can make it into the classroom would actually walk out with something or create something or do something and everyone is welcome. And they are, it'll be what, 50 minutes short workshops. We'll just talk about some policies for the first one, give you some resources, look at the conversation around policies. And then by the end, you should ideally walk away with something that you can put into your syllabus that wouldn't be, again, the end all be all policy, but would at the very least let students know how you intend for them to use this or not. Hey, I'm okay with you brainstorming with it. Great. That means you're not a cheater if you opened up ChatGPT to do something with it. But that clarity is missing from a lot of classrooms where students, for example, will walk out of my room where I tell them, here's what you can use it for. And they'll tell me, well, actually, this teacher doesn't have a policy. I don't know what to do with it. So I tell them, don't touch it. Don't submit any work for that teacher, because you're calling the trouble. They've clearly determined that it's not to be used. So at the end of my lesson, when you walk out that door, my AI policy concludes at that point. So I cannot dictate what other people do in their classroom, but that's why I'm interested in this expanded conversation with all of us. Yeah, Chris.
Rodrigo, in the chat, it's recommended resource to check out. It's teachai.org/toolkit. I don't know if you've heard it or not, but it's a complete toolkit to orient educators all the way from deans down to the teacher level. And it also has some other sample policies that instructors can take a look at and implement into their courses along with it. It's a complete toolkit for an entire district or college to better understand AI and how it's going to impact us. So I recommend checking that out.
Appreciate that. Thank you. I'll definitely take a look at what it contains, what new ideas can emerge, what ideas I may have missed. I appreciate that truly. I definitely want to expand my own understanding of everything going on. So let's share those resources. Please, Donna, go ahead.
Thank you. Is there any validity to teaching, I won't say old school then, so that say an ESL, ELAC students or young students, my grandchildren learn English, learn to write, correctly. Is that, or do we need to just all be looking towards AI like that and teaching with that?
Oh, no, you should certainly be doing all the same things you were doing to teach children literacy and get them to play with language and get them to be creative and get them to tell stories and get them to imagine. And all of those things are still absolutely essential. If anything, I'd say that that's the attitude that should be maintained with new technologies being applied. Be a kid, go play, find out how this works, because it will streamline your language if you produce short form examples that the student that you're trying to teach can read. You can tell it, hey, take this very complex idea and explain it to a 2-year-old, explain it to a 3-year-old, explain it to a 5-year-old, explain it to a 20-year-old, explain it to a whatever age group you would like. And so here I think there is a new ability, maybe a new power that we can have for streamlining information for different audiences, including those who are second language learners, anyone who is translating information to really understand it, which I myself, as a Spanish speaker first, completely understand. I learned English in first grade. And so I remember not understanding the language for a long time, but now the way that I think of this tool, it can empower literacy is all I will say. And Adona. I love your bookshelf before you say anything. G, are you there? Maybe not.
Rodrigo, was your presentation generated on the free plan?
Yes.
What? Okay, good.
Yes. I try to avoid paying when I can, especially if I'm going to showcase tools to people that I don't want to turn into consumers. So free. And some of these resources may become paid over time, so I'll probably stop using some as new tools emerge. And the cool thing about it is that we're at the very beginning of this. I mean, these tools will only improve. So yeah, I think that seems like a good lull to maybe call it a day. Thank you guys for attending. Thank you guys for your questions and the points that you brought up. I truly appreciate your time. I appreciate that you're here to join the conversation, share your insights. Again, if you have students or anybody who you think you yourself would like to publish or write or be part of these panels, my email is rgomez001@sdccd.edu. Please reach out.
Thank you, Rodrigo.
Thanks, Rodrigo.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.